There is a scenario that I find particularly interesting. We understand a lot of English, French, or Chinese, or German, or any other language that we want to learn. We can watch videos, listen to podcasts, and read articles without too much difficulty. But when it is our turn to speak or to write, our mind suddenly goes blank. We know that we have learned the words before, but somehow we cannot use them. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. It has definitely happened to me. So in this video, I want to share 2 practical exercises that can help you turn your passive vocabulary into active vocabulary. The first is a 1-minute speaking challenge. And then the second one is writing. These 2 exercises can help you move from simply understanding a language to actually creating with it. As we know, comprehensible input is important, but it is not enough. Let me explain what is comprehensible input. There is a popular language learning method called comprehensible input. The idea is that we learn a language by reading and listening to content that we can mostly understand. Maybe we are learning English, or French, Chinese, German, Japanese, or any other language. Whatever language you are learning, you can probably find hundreds of comprehensible input videos online. These videos are extremely useful. They help us become familiar with pronunciation, sentence structure, vocabulary, and the natural rhythm of a language. However, there is one problem. We may spend hundreds of hours watching these videos and still struggle to speak fluently. I encountered this situation, and that motivates me to find the solution. Many language learners experience the same problem. It is completely normal. It can also be extremely frustrating because the reason is simple. Understanding a language and producing a language are 2 different skills. Comprehensible input helps us recognize the language, but recognition does not automatically mean that we can express ourselves naturally. At some point, we need to transform comprehensible input into what I call creative output. We need to stop being only listeners and readers, but speakers and writers. So the first exercise is 1-minute speaking challenge. For example, the challenge that we can open a random article or Wikipedia page. We set a timer for 1 minute, and then we read a short section and then pause, and then explain our thoughts aloud. It cannot be too long. We just read one article. We can summarize what we have read and give our opinion, and then collect the topic to our own exercise. The important thing is that we should not simply read the article aloud. We need to respond to it in our own words. So, for example, this article, Saudis reach deal with US that could let them enrich nuclear fuel. So we could read the first sentences. US lawmakers and Israel. After reading the article about the Saudi Arabia's nuclear program, civilian nuclear program, in these articles, many experts worry that losing the nuclear restriction on Saudi Arabia could set a dangerous precedent, and then other countries in Middle East could demand similar treatment, and this will increase regional tensions. And then, in my opinion, history is full of similar examples and showing that how nuclear technology can create serious security risk, and if the security is not controlled, and then the decision to loosen these restrictions should be carefully reconsidered. So in this, you don't need to push yourself to be perfect to speak English, and our goal is not to give a professional speech. Our goal is to notice what happens when we try to express ourselves spontaneously, naturally, and then record ourselves while we speak. And during this kind of exercise, we will probably forget some words because we just forgot how to say it correctly. And then maybe we already know the word, but when we say it, but we cannot remember it at the moment. And then we have an idea in our native language, but we cannot know how to express it naturally in the target language. So when this happens, what we could do is like to write down the word and the idea we were trying to express, and we can write it in our native language first. And then after we finish recording, we can ask ourselves what's the difficulties that we encountered, and then ask AI to help us review our speaking. We can ask questions such as, was my grammar correct? And then did my expression sound natural? How could a native speaker express the same ideas more clearly, more naturally? And then ask AI about what words or expressions that I was missing when I speak. So we can give AI the transcript of our recording and ask the AI to correct the most important mistakes. However, do not try to memorize every correction. I have tried this, but I felt it was overwhelming. We can choose 2 or 3 useful expressions from each practice sessions. We write it down in the notebook, and our notebook can be digital or physical because it doesn't matter what kind of form. What matters is that you collect the expressions you genuinely needed while speaking. So these expressions are very valuable because they come from a real gap between our expression and the communication. They are not random words from our vocabulary list. They are words that we wanted to use, but we could not access. And then it also helps us to wake up our dormant vocabulary. I think they are sleeping, though. Many learners already know thousands of words, especially if they read a lot, they listen a lot. But the problem is that a large part of this kind of vocabulary is passive. We understand these words when we read or hear them, but we cannot use them spontaneously, naturally. And I like to think of these words as dominant vocabulary, and then I call it lazy words, lazy vocabulary. The words are already somewhere in our minds and they are sleeping. And speaking practice helps us wake them up. And we can think of our active vocabulary as a garden. Every 1 minute or 2 minutes speaking exercise, it would plant a few seeds. Each time we review our mistakes, we could water those seeds. And then if we use the new expressions, it could help them grow. We may not see an immediate result after 1 or 2 practice sessions, but if we continue doing that, if we continue practicing, the words will gradually become easier to access. And eventually, we will be able to use them without consciously searching for them. Another thing to remember is that not all words are equally useful. Some words and expressions appear much more frequently in daily conversations than others, no matter the languages, English, Chinese, and French. So at the beginning, focus on the language that helps we communicate in real situations. For example, we can ask for help, explain a problem that we encounter, give directions if necessary, and then describe an experience during a job interview, and then express an opinion talking about our emotions, and then if we are sick, we have to visit a doctor or respond in an emergency. Those are survival words. We should learn simple expressions that help us to organize our thoughts and our ideas. For example, I say this in English, but we can transfer it into French or Chinese or German. This was, for example, the main reason is, what I mean is, from my perspective, in my opinion, it depends on the situation. I'm not sure how to explain this, but Those expressions look simple, but they are extremely useful. They give us time to think and help us express complex ideas in a clear way. Once we become comfortable with frequently used language, we can gradually expand into more exercise and more precise and less common vocabulary. The second exercise is writing. I could already communicate quite fluently in English before I started writing gradually. And I could use English and French at work. But because of that, I was making the same mistakes over and over again. The tenses, the preparations, etc. Also realized that my fluency was highly topic specific. I could speak confidently about my work because I had used the same professional vocabulary and expressions several times. But when I tried to explain and talk about an unfamiliar subject or describe an everyday experience in detail, I suddenly struggled. For example, I could discuss a work project in English, but when I tried to describe something as ordinary as cooking a dish, I sometimes could not find the right words, and I'm not satisfied with myself. I knew what I wanted to say, but I could not express the experience precisely. And that was the moment when I realized that being fluent in one area does not mean that we can express ourselves clearly in every area. We need to practice, we need to improve our English. In my case, my professional comfort zone had hidden the weaknesses in my English and my French. So I pushed myself to start writing more often. And then in language learning, writing is an effective way to turn passive vocabulary into active vocabulary. When we speak, we usually have very little time to think. We rely on the words and sentence structures that are already easy for us to access. It's a habit. And that's why we often repeat the same vocabulary and make the same mistakes over and over again. And then writing gives us more time, and because we can pause, we can search for more precise words that we want to use, and then we can reorganize a sentence structure. It allows us to notice that an expression does not sound right and we could try another word. But I have to admit that writing can also feel exhausting, especially when we are not used to doing it. I think an appropriate amount of discomfort can be a good teacher. Difficulty is not always a sign that we are failing, because it is also a sign that we could improve ourselves. We are in the process of improving. Sometimes it is a sign that we are finally practicing something outside our comfort zone. And the purpose of writing is not necessarily to become a professional writer. Writing is simply another language skill that we want to practice. And I think even native speakers, whatever the language, Chinese, English, or French, who communicate very well in everyday conversations, they may struggle to express themselves clearly in writing, because excellent writing, or we could say good writing, requires conscious training, deliberate practicing, and time. For many learners, writing is one of the most demanding language skills, because it forces us to make our thoughts more precise. And then in everyday speech, we can use simple words, repeat ourselves, and we could use gestures or correct ourselves immediately. In writing, our ideas need to be more organized. We often need more specific words and clearer logical connections. That is why I think writing can reveal weaknesses that speaking sometimes hides. We do not need to write a long essay every day. We could start with a short paragraph. We could write something about what happened that day. We could explain our ideas, our opinion. We could describe a problem that we want to fix. We could summarize an article or write about something that we found difficult to explain in a conversation. And then we finish writing, we could ask AI to check our writing, because it's a way to learn language, to learn how to write correctly. We can ask AI questions like, please correct my grammar without changing my main ideas. And then we could ask which expressions sound unnatural in my writing, and how can I express those ideas more precisely. We could ask, which mistakes do I repeat? Because this is important. We repeat the same mistakes without knowing. then compare our original version with the corrected version. We choose a few useful sentences and rewrite them in our own words. We can also use the new expression in another paragraph for speaking exercise. Those steps are important because saying a correction is still a form of input. We need to use the correction ourselves before it can become part of our active language. The routine that I think we can try. Every day we could do 1 minute speaking exercise, and then after each exercise we collect 2 or 3 useful words or expressions. We do this 2 or 3 times a week, and then we write a short paragraph about a topic that is interesting for you or difficult to you. We ask AI to correct it, identifying the repeated mistakes and the suggestion for more natural expressions. At the end of the week, we can review our notes because we use physical digital notebook. And then we choose 5 expressions or more than 5 and use them in a new recording. Purpose is not to collect vocabulary. The purpose is to reuse the vocabulary. And then the notebook full of words is not necessarily an active vocabulary. It can be the passive, and then we active them when we repeatedly use those vocabularies and then to communicate our ideas. In my experience, comprehensible input is essential because it helps us understand how a language sounds, how it works, and then it develops our listening ability, any other ability, reading and the vocabulary, awareness of our natural expression, speaking flow. But creative output helps us build a personal relationship with the language. When we speak and write, we are no longer simply consuming the information or consuming someone else's sentences. We are learning to create our sentences. We create our own. And then comprehensible input teaches us to recognize the language, and creative output teaches us to own it. We develop our ownership. I suggest that like that. After watching the video, we can open a random Wikipedia page and then set a timer for 1 minute and record yourself explaining what you have read. And then choose just 3 expressions that you wish you had known. And then write them down or review them and try to use them again next day. We can do this kind of speaking exercise. We just need to start creating, not consuming. And then by doing this, we are no longer only a member of the audience. We are also a creator. We could write, we could speak, we could turn the passive into active. We are proactive. And then, in my opinion, everyone can be a creator while not only a consumer. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and because it is long, thank you for your patience and see you next time. Ciao, ciao.